It's long been a struggle, protecting the Amazon and at the same time allowing Brazil's growing population to make a living in this region. Once chiefly populated by remote outposts, people who made a living on the river, nearly 25 million people now call the Amazon basin home. Brazil is changing. These changes are threatening the environment and its people. The rainforest is shrinking. Brazil's economy has been rapidly growing and is closing in on becoming the 5th largest in the world. But this summer of discontent in Brazil saw hundreds of thousands of people pour into the streets in spontaneous protest, demanding Brazil's leaders improve the quality of life here and pay for better basic services such as education and health care. Brazil has an ambitious economic growth plan, and to make the economy swell by 4.5 or 5% per year, there are increased demands to further tap into the rainforest for lumber, minerals, farming, and more recently, construction for dams and hydroelectric power.
We achieve now new challenges. So we need new fundings to finance that.
Eduardo Braga is a powerful Brazilian senator from the state of Amazonas.
And those funding must come as fast as possible, because if they don't, they are going to pressure again strongly the deforestation in the Amazon.
In simple, blunt terms, this rich, diverse region, home to half the world's remaining rainforest, could thrive. But it also runs the risk of being destroyed.
I would say that we are in the tipping point.
A tipping point. From Macapá to Manaus, Altamira, and Parapuebas, only 10% of Brazil's population lives in the Amazon. Demand from Brazil's megacities like Sao Paulo is threatening the balance and raises the question, can the Amazon survive economic success? Simmering frustration among Brazilians boiled over in the past several months. Many here are upset that the country is spending multiple billions as Brazil prepares to host the World Cup in 2014 and the Olympics 2 years after that. But the largest drain on government money has nothing to do with sports or stadiums. This is it. A behemoth of a construction project called the Belo Monte Dam in the state of Para in the heart of the Amazon basin. Proponents say the hydroelectric dam will provide a staggering amount of clean energy, leaving a small environmental footprint. Critics charge it is a tremendous threat to the well-being of the forest, the Amazon, and its tributaries. More than 20,000 people will be displaced, and it is one of 60, that's right, 60 dams Brazil wants to build in the next decade to create hydroelectric power. Giant machines chew into hard rock. Construction is overseen by a conglomerate of 18 companies under the name Norte Energia.
Não tenha dúvida que eu acho que a engenharia brasileira é fantástica nisso. Eu não é só a engenharia brasileira, acho que a engenharia é fantástica, porque ela consegue modificar a paisagem, né? E se adaptar ao ambiente.
Changing the scenery is an understatement. The Xingu River, one of the main tributaries of the Amazon River, was diverted so construction could begin here just 2 years ago. We were the first crew to get this close to the construction. We're in the belly of the beast. You're looking at what will be the face of the Belo Monte Dam. And up there, the massive turbines will go into place that will generate all the electricity. By any standards, this is a massive construction project. To put it in perspective, more earth is being moved here than in the entire construction of the Panama Canal. And all this has been done in just the past 2 years. It will take an additional 6 years, under the best of conditions, for the Belo Monte to be completed. If the engineers are right, Belo Monte will create more than 11,000 megawatts of power running at full capacity. That's enough electricity for 18 million homes. Brazil's government says it is building scores of dams in the Amazon for hydroelectric power to feed the country's growing demand for energy and is vital for the country's economy to grow at a rapid rate.
Otherwise, we're going to have a thermal generation. See, every day we made a footprint in the environment. The question is, what's the cost benefit of this footprint? Is this cost important enough to justify this footprint? I would say Belo Monte is one of the best cost benefit that we have in hydraulic dam in Brazil.
There are many who vehemently argue the environmental costs are just too great. Maria Oliveira feels only pain.
Por ter o direito que eles querem ter, fazer uma coisa dessa comigo, que sou mulher e idosa.
Oliveira says in a heartbeat, her house was destroyed by Norte Energia, and she was forced to move from the 200 hectares of land she, her children, and grandchildren had lived for the past 23 years.
Aqui que é o desprezo, é o desgosto. A gente ter as coisas da gente e o camarada fazer uma coisa dessa. Me matado.
This land gave her a livelihood, everything she needed: fruit trees, cacao, fresh water, a host of crops she planted, and livestock were right outside her door.
Eu não comprava, aí eu estou assim, sem nada.
Norte Energia has set aside more than $230 million to help relocate people like Oliveira. And she was moved from her former tranquil setting to this. This is the town of Altamira. From high above, it appears scenic, even quiet. However, a look from the ground paints a totally different picture. Crime and violence have flourished as thousands of migrants and Belo Monte construction workers have poured into the city.
Eu vivia de um jeito, hoje estou num jeito muito ruim, porque não dá para mim viver aqui. Uma zoada, cabaré por todo lado, zoada de carro, morte toda hora. Aí eu fico nervosa, neta aqui.
Oliveira's only temporary solace is going through the fruits, seeds, and spices that she was able to bring from her former home back to the squalor of Altamira. Norte Energia did offer her money for her old property. She says about $150,000, half of what she says the land is worth. Despite the social concerns, Norte Energia agrees with Brazil's government that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, like Oliveira.
O Brasil não cresce se não tiver energia. Então nós temos aí, talvez estudos aí, que até 2030 a gente precisa de energia. Depois disso aí a gente muda a nossa matriz de crescimento. E aí você não mais está atrelado à sua energia.
And there is the government argument that hydroelectric power is clean energy, no long-term risks.
Yes, we do have a cost. Yes, we do have impacted in that area of Belo Monte. But compare with others impact that we have, even in Brazil, even worldwide, the cost benefit is still positive to Belo Monte.
Philip Fernside is one of the leading scientists focusing on global warming. He's convinced this massive undertaking is bad for Brazil and even worse for the world climate.
Dams emit greenhouse gases from the forest that is there when it's originally flooded.
It sounds counterintuitive to what Belo Monte supporters say. Hydroelectric dams are supposed to be free of spewing carbon associated with fossil fuels. But here is what's at stake. Vast amounts of land will be flooded to build the dams, The rising water will submerge thousands and thousands of acres of vegetation.
Very quickly loses all of its oxygen. It turns into CO2 as things rot on the bottom of the reservoir. And after that, it doesn't have oxygen. So everything that decomposes turns into methane instead.
They are greenhouse gases.
It's just like opening a bottle of Coca-Cola. You see all those bubbles coming out? That's CO2 that's dissolved in the water because it's under pressure. Leaves and soft vegetation, and that will rot where there's no oxygen, so it produces methane instead of CO2. And methane has a much greater impact per ton than CO2 does. So you have a big release of both gases in the first few years.
Here's the problem as Fernside sees it. Belo Monte will flood a large area of vegetation. As the vegetation near the surface rots, CO2, or carbon dioxide, will be released. In the deeper water, the decaying vegetation turns to methane, CH4. Fernside says massive amounts of methane will be released into the atmosphere as water is channeled through Belo Monte's turbines.
This time in the next decade or two is exactly when we have to control global warming. If we don't do something about this now, the consequences are going to be very great. It includes the risk to the Amazon forest itself.
Why do people refuse to buy into this?
I think most people have not even heard about these problems. People have been told so many times that dams are clean energy and green and so forth that they're surprised to learn that they actually emit greenhouse gases.
Fernside says there is much developers are concealing about the Belo Monte project. It's supposed to cost about $14 billion US. But with all the setbacks and legal challenges the dam is facing, some experts believe it could end up costing Brazil twice as much. And who is funding the project? 80% is being paid for by taxpayers. The same people demonstrating in the streets over allegations of fraud and misuse of public money.
É projeto de muito investimento e pouco lucro.
Antonia Mello runs Xingu Vivo, or Xingu Alive. For a quarter of a century, she has been battling efforts to build a dam on the river. Mello and many others believe building the dam will lead to genocide for indigenous people who live near the Xingu and depend on the river for food and water.
Não tem mais como resgatar. Eles serão dizimados, sim. A sua cultura desaparecerá, como muitos indígenas nesse país.
Damming the Xingu calls for an engineering feat to divert the water into two channels. The Belo Monte project will reduce the flow of water through a 100-kilometer stretch known as the Big Bend to just 20% of its current level. Environmental impact statements show it could have a devastating effect on fish here, and in turn, greatly impact the indigenous population.
When you are talking about forests, when you are talking about Indians, when you are talking about water, animals, always we can romantic too much this matter.
Brazil's government and Norte Energia counter blistering concerns by saying only indigenous tribes will suffer no direct impact from the construction.
You can talk a lot with the heart and about emotions and everything, but in the end, still we need the energy, the economy, we need new jobs.
Indigenous people such as the Kayapo are fighting back against what they see at best as callous statements, and at worst, genocide.
Take a spark of intuition and a helping of inspiration, a dash of contemplation and a heap of experience. Add a good handful of character, then turn on the heat.
Brazil's Belo Monte Dam is going up in the heart of a region that's home to the greatest population of indigenous people in the country. Not surprisingly, they are among the leaders trying to shut down the project under an umbrella group called Xingu Vivo. The head of the organization calls Belo Monte government-sanctioned indigenous genocide.
Belo Monte é projeto que vem para dizimar esses povos aqui no Médio Xingu, na bacia do Xingu. São os mais violentados. Barragem é uma forma de violência muito forte contra as pessoas. É destruir a vida. Viva a nossa luta!
Xingu Vivo and an army of indigenous people disrupted construction a number of times with demonstrations and legal challenges. But in the end, man and machine have always returned to chew away at the earth and continue building.
When some people look at this, they see environmental devastation. What do you see?
Se a gente olhar no momento, nós estamos realmente fazendo uma devastação. Depois, quando a gente integrar isso aí à natureza, isso aí já não é uma coisa assim que mostra que houve uma devastação.
By integrating into nature, Norte Energia and Brazil's government are counting on this dam to provide electricity to as many as 18 million homes and businesses and to help the country's economic growth.